Okay. Now, we're very fortunate because we have a minister joining us. Lord Dominic Johnson is the Minister for Investment at the Department for Business and Trade. And we're delighted that he's joined us because this topic is so incredibly important for the UK and all of our trading partners. To make sure he gets maximum time, I'm going to please invite him up to the stage. Give him a big hand of applause to Lord Dominic Johnson.
Well, thank you very much, Eric. And I noticed as soon as it was mentioned there was a minister coming, everyone fled for the door. But those of you in the middle couldn't get out, so I'm grateful that you're still penned in. Have you had a very good day so far? Yes. Didn't you think that last seminar was fascinating? I mean, it's extraordinary. And I like to ask when I go to these sorts of events, I ask people to put their hands up if they think AI is going to be important. Okay, what a terrible question. I know, but I love asking this question. Put your hand up if you think it's going to be important. Come on, you put your hand straight up. I know, brilliant. Anyone, the gentleman at the back hasn't put his hand up because it's such an inane question. He's quite right to dismiss it by sitting on his hands. But my next question, and I'm going to ask you this again, is who thinks that they're going to have their lives entirely disintermediated by AI and they're almost certainly going to lose their job as a result? Put your hands up. And not a single person in this room has put their hand up. One lady in a striped jumper at the back, I think. You put your hand up. Obviously, you're not very certain about your career, possibly. But I think it's extraordinary that in a room where everyone here, we do an AI summit, we put our hands up thinking somehow that the world will be changed by AI, but we don't think it will change our lives. But one of the things we've heard over the last few days, and today particularly, and just in that seminar there, is that the lives of the two individuals who are just speaking in the panel are going to have their entire careers hugely disintermediated. And I think one of the things we saw at the Bletchley Park AI Safety Summit, I think was a great credit, by the way, to Rishi Sunak and this government, was the realization amongst us as government ministers of the intense importance of trying to get ahead of the regulatory curve. And by the way, that's very unusual for governments. I was like you. By the way, just to let you know, I was like you a year ago, not quite as well paid or successful, but I was a happy business person. And I spent my life investing in global emerging markets. Does anyone here invest in global emerging markets or frontier markets? Hands up if you do. If you do, you're very sensible. Stay in tech. They're very difficult. In frontier markets, there's always a political crisis. They're always changing leader. So I left that business and went into British politics. And all I can say is stay where you are if you want to make a change. But I come from business, so I feel your pain. And in government, one thing that the government is nearly always, is behind the curve, is slow to regulate, is late to the party when it comes to doing what is necessary to catch up with technology. But in this instance, we're ahead of the game, and I think it's very important. You should feel a great degree of confidence that we're so far ahead of the game, actually. People are still trying to catch up. They're trying to work out what it is that we're doing in the British government. I think that's very, very powerful. It's an incredibly important message to all of you. And I wanted to say a few things about sort of what I think the interactions and issues are going to be when it comes to the government working with your sector. But the first thing I want to do is say thank you to Edenbase for putting on this very important day seminar, and Transformbase. Yes! Which is a really powerful way for people to think and come together and discuss and swap ideas and learn about these new technologies and new paradigms that are going to change our world. So I think Eric and his team, it's a fabulous business. And I respect him and his colleagues. And all of you here who are investors. Who's an investor in the room? Come on, hands up. There she is. Hands, come on, don't be shy. Are you an investor? No? Yeah? No, I'm looking at you. Are you an investor? Put your hands up again if you're an investor. Come on, put your hands up, put your hands up. Let me see you. I love you the most in the room. In the hierarchy of gratitude, those with the cash are at the very top. And investing's very difficult, isn't it? It's the hardest thing to do. And I say this at every meeting I go to, at every opportunity I can to speak. I say this important sentence, which is there is no more important act. There is no more noble human endeavor than allocating capital to the highest point of return. And when I say that, everyone bursts out laughing. Like I said, something that's inappropriate or ridiculous, Eric. But it isn't. Capitalism, as Ronald Reagan rightly pointed out, in our astonishing journey from the swamp to the stars, is what has provided us with the goods and the services that will literally allow us to lead longer, happier lives. So truly, what you do in terms of allocating capital to the highest point of return, reallocating capital from areas where it is unproductive to areas where it is productive, is exactly what this conversation today is about. You're going to move from old technologies, from old systems and concepts, into new ones to generate those new rates of return. And that shift in capital, like water in a tank, will actually drive the crucial social, economic, philosophical, and societal changes that will allow us to have, in this country, global leadership, but also as people and as a humanity, the longer, happier lives that we so need. And I know how difficult it is. It's not just a question of walking around in a fleece, a zip-up fleece, with the logo of your company on the left-hand side. I know it's more difficult than that. It's very, very hard indeed to allocate capital. And I just want to know how much I respect you in doing that, having spent 30 years of my life doing investment management, running investment management businesses all over the world, but how important that you know the government places on this task. So Rishi Sunak, Jeremy Hunt, entrepreneurs, asset managers, my colleagues, Andrew Griffiths, head of Sky, CFO for Sky, so many of my colleagues in the Department for Business and Trade, Kevin Hollingray, and Nigel Huddleston, one from Google, one set up his own successful estate agency. We all come from a deep business background, either entrepreneurial or investment-based. So we understand what it is you're trying to do, and it is our ambition in the British government to make this environment, the United Kingdom, the most attractive place to invest in the world. So be reassured, we do stand truly behind you. Who knows what the 9 most terrifying words in the English language are? I'm from the government and I'm here to help. Well, actually, in this instance, I am from the government and I am here to help. So be reassured that I do stand behind you. And thank you very much. Yes, you should be grateful to the government for the work we do. And the second group of people I want to thank are the entrepreneurs. Hands up business leaders here, entrepreneurs and business leaders, AI, supremos, visionaries, and movers and shakers. Come on, don't be embarrassed. Don't put your hand back down. Put your hand up. I saw you put your hand up, and I saw you put your hand down again. Put your hand up if you are an entrepreneur, you're running a business. Come on. Let's see. Now, don't do anything yet, but put your hand down if you find it easy running a business and being an entrepreneur. You put your hand down over there. It's easy, is it? You make it look easy, possibly. It's a very difficult thing to do to run a business. So when I say, you can put your hands down now if you haven't already. And again, I come from an entrepreneurial background, as do so many of my colleagues. Running a business is, and particularly a business in a new and advanced, and in many instances maybe unproven and funded technology, is incredibly difficult. It's a personal mission. And again, as conservatives, and this is important, okay, I'm going to be political for a moment. As conservatives, and as a conservative government, the belief in you as entrepreneurs to drive change in this country and to create the value and the products and the services is not to be underestimated in how much we know you should be cherished and celebrated. And I really think that it's something that the rest of this nation needs to be much more aware of, that the personal, discretionary, emotional capital that you invest alongside the economic and physical capital that creates your businesses. And you get up in the morning and you have that tension in the stomach, don't you? Anyone have that? Nod if you know what I'm coming from. Yes, if you've got to raise the money, you've got to deal with all these terrible people, shareholders, they're pretty bad, particularly private equity, no disrespect to any of the private equity here. Suppliers, customers, government, the government. You know, we're aware of how difficult it is to deal with all the regulations. I'm not talking about the complex AI regulations, just basic regulations. And of course, worst of all, your partners and colleagues. And I just want everyone to know that, rather like Bill Clinton said, I feel your pain. And we want to do everything we can to get out of your way to enable you to build successful businesses. And I hope you hear that truly from me. And you know, if any of you are on LinkedIn, anyone on LinkedIn here? You're on LinkedIn. Anyone LinkedIn with me, though? Is anyone LinkedIn with me? No? That's sad. Normally 1 or 2 people have. Normally some of the officials I brought with me have LinkedIn. But even they haven't linked in with me. But link in with me, because I'm here to help you genuinely, to support you as individuals in helping you achieve your dreams. Because by doing that, we get a better economy and we become more successful genuinely as a nation. And when I think of the challenges, and I'd like to just touch on some of the challenges, and I'm going to finish very briefly with what the government is doing to answer them. When I think of the challenges, they are significant. When I think of AI and I think of future tech, it really is quite, I become quite sort of binary. I lurch between overjoyous optimism that my life will become one of ease and leisure, to terror that I'm going to be controlled by some machine and have no more happiness again. I don't know if any of you are like that. I mean, it really is such an extreme concept. But when I think of the challenges and I hear people push back about concepts such as AI, I'm just reminded of 2 very personal stories. And the first is Juan. And my wife, the other day, we were at a dinner party, and she said, I've got to get back. I have to charge the phone. And the nice possible way, my wife's always letting her phone run out of battery. I think it's a mechanism to prevent me from telephoning her. I said, why do we have to go back? Why do you have to charge the phone? She said, I have to charge the phone so that I can feed Juan. And Juan, it turns out, is an electronic pet. It's a digital pet. It's a chicken. And it comes from Angry Birds. If any of you have a... Does anyone else have a digital pet, a digital chicken pet? You're nodding your head. Well, she had this pet. And I have to remind you that I have a cat, I have 2 dogs, I've got 3 children, and I keep bees, so I've got 40,000 other pets. So I've got plenty of animals who I'm feeding. Okay, they're expensive and cumbersome. The bees, however, are a joy. I thoroughly recommend those. My cat's very grumpy. But I thought, why do we have an electronic pet? So I went back, we charged a phone. And I was intrigued by this. And clearly, I was slightly ridiculing her for this electronic pet. But we fed it, we went through the process, we bought the apples, and it munched them down. It looked so happy, and it contentedly sat plump in its nest with a nappy. And I felt, bizarrely, the same, I don't know what it is, serotonin, endorphin, whatever it is that the brain releases, that little peak of happiness. That peak of happiness I felt when I fed my cat this morning. Now, you may think that's a bit pathetic, but it's so fascinating, isn't it? When you assume that technology, and we heard this just in the last session, can it replace, can you replace loneliness? Can it replace human? Can we replace these emotional points? And I just saw the evidence there. Anyway, I killed Juan the next day because I don't really want to be beholden to an electronic pet. Hands up here who thinks I should have killed Juan. Put your hands up. Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting that you know it's an electronic pet, and half of you still think it should live, which again is a fascinating demonstration of how our lives are going to change. And then if I think of my daughter, I don't know if anyone here has a 15-year-old daughter. That probably sounds a bit peculiar when asked at the top of a stage. Anyone have young children? Anyone have teenagers? Come on, you got teenagers? Yeah? Anyone got teenage daughters? Teenage daughters? They're terrifying, aren't they? They rule. They rule. I'm terrified of my teenage daughter. But if I think of her life and I think of mine, and I think of the comparisons, and this is the ultra challenge for politicians, is I was born. Anyone born in 1974? Great vintage. No 74s here? No? April? Anyone born in April? At least we have that in common. That's better. April the 6th? Anyone on April the 6th? No. Well, 1974 is a great year. And I was born, okay? And that's probably the only thing I have in common with my 15-year-old daughter. And then I went to school, and I finished education at 21. I went to university. And I left, and I started a career. And I bought a car, and I did the same job really all my life. I changed companies once or twice, but I basically did the same thing. And I bought a house, and I got married, and I had children. And I'll retire, and eventually I'll die. Okay? When you think about my life, it doesn't actually sound much better than Juan's. But my daughter, the only thing she has in common with me is that she's been born. But she's not going to go to school and finish education like so many of us did. I'm looking at people in the audience roughly my age. They finished education. You might go and do an MBA for 2 years just because, we want to change of pace. We're not really being re-educated. She's going to be educated, I think, two or three completely totally different concepts of careers, not just moving from law to accounting or something. So she's not going to finish her education. She's not going to get a job in the same way that I did. We think people of her age will have 5 different careers. That's completely different lines and occupations. She won't buy a car. Her mobility will be completely different. The way she uses property, the way she enjoys property. Maybe she can't sadly afford to buy property in the Western democracy. She won't marry in the same way. She'll have children much later. She won't retire, and she may not die. So this is an extraordinarily different generation that's coming up beneath us. And if I think critically about Western democracies, particularly because I'm more familiar with them, very few governments are really thinking about how on earth we're going to deal with these total seismic changes in how people are going to live their lives, philosophically, in terms of a sense of purpose, when purposefulness is removed, if you call having a clerical role or whatever it may be, that's removed from your possibility range. How we deal with the way people want to live their life, as well as the necessity in terms of how they're going to live their lives. And the only government that's truly grasping this and really understands the seriousness, the emergency, the crisis, actually, of these decisions that are before us is the British government. And Rishi Sunak is determined that we become a science and technology superpower. And I think when people hear that line, they think, is that like some election slogan or whatever it is? And they just switch off. The reality is he understands, as do the rest of us in the leadership of this country, how essential it is that we invest, we pour money at a time when we don't have any surplus fiscal credit. We pour money into AI, as we have done with the many billions that we're putting into that industry. We pour money into skills, another 118 million announced at the Bletchley Park Accord, which was signed up by a number of countries. But around that time, we announced a huge amount of investment into supercomputers, X-scale computers, quantum computing talent. A huge amount of money, I think £1 million or £2 million, just spent on going out into the world and getting the brightest people in the world to the United Kingdom. I'm sure some of them are you sitting here. We see this emergency to create a science and technology superpower, because if we don't, the United Kingdom is simply a second-class price-taking nation. And we can't answer these emergency questions about how we're going to deal as a democracy with the extraordinary changes in the way people both want to live their lives and have to live their lives. So this sort of event where there is true debate, where we're hearing really powerful, sometimes uncomfortable truths about what these new technologies will bring upon us and how fast they will move, is absolutely essential. So I congratulate Edenbase and the Transform Base subsidiary that you've created. And I congratulate all of you who are smart enough and forward-thinking enough to make those investments in the new technologies. Many of them won't work, many of the companies will go bust. And by the way, we should celebrate that. We've become too risk-averse in our societies, and we are now too frightened of anything failing, actually to take the right level of risk to enable us to have successful outcomes. So I cherish and value you as investors. And for you entrepreneurs, for you people creating the business, throw your caps over the wall. It's the most incredible and exciting and innovative journey. And I truly think, if I look back in history, there isn't a more extraordinary time to be creating and investing in these new technologies. And know from my point of view, Eric and everyone in this room, that the British government is completely 100% behind you. We want you to be a success. We want you to build hugely valuable and profitable companies, and we want you to solve these extraordinary economic, societal, and philosophical problems that face us today. So thank you for giving me some time, and I look forward to following up with you at another point.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's great. I have to answer any questions if anyone has a question, or I can clear off.
No, if you're happy to answer questions.
I'm happy to answer quick
amazing.
questions if you want, but otherwise I'll...
Absolutely. Well, this is an unexpected pleasure. Questions. So
I didn't charge for questions on my original invoice, but I will.
So firstly, thank you for being here and showing how important this is as a sector. We did want to hear that, so that's great. What can we do to help the government achieve some more momentum following the AI Safety Summit?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I think that the debate itself is very intriguing and powerful, and what you're doing in terms of framing that and allowing people to have an open discussion is great. I mean, I'm much more optimistic than some of my colleagues or some of the society in terms of I spend more time in my volatile journey being positive about AI than negative. I think it's actually quite important to make the case. The press can tend to be quite binary. So originally it was all very excited about AI, and then they went through a phase where it was very negative about AI. It was going to have huge negative impacts on our lives. So represent yourselves. Go out there and talk about it out loud. And connect with the government. I don't know if anyone here is connected with the Department for Business and Trade. Hands up if you have. Well, I know, but you used to work, I think, at the Department of Business and Trade, Elizabeth. That doesn't count. A couple of you. But the reality is, truly, we are here to absorb your views. And when you look at public consultations, and I know there's always a sort of one going on around these industries, do respond to them. We need your feedback, and I'm keen to hear from it myself.
Thanks, we will. OK, one quick question from the audience. Anybody just here in the front? Would you sprint down with the microphone? No, don't sprint. It's against insurance.
Is it?
Yes.
Health and safety.
Hello there, I'm Jez. I have kids in schools, and I'm concerned that the national curriculum does not educate them for the world that they will be working in 10 years' time. There's no AI, I mean, the job situation is going to be completely different by the time they're employable, and we're not educating them in the ways that would be useful.
Yeah, I've got great sympathy with that view. I mean, the Prime Minister's been driving this, and he announced this in the King's Speech, this new form of A-levels, those are baccalaureate-type A-levels, which is designed to exactly answer that question, to try and pull people into the right educational streams to give them the skills that will allow them to not just compete, but actually just to survive. And I think that it's crucial that we have strong mathematical and English skills. But also, I'm quite intrigued about other pieces. This isn't government policy, by the way, but I've always been very intrigued by the concepts such as rhetoric. Because I think if you look at society, if you remove a great deal of purpose around occupational work, then what do people do? And I think that you become more focused on yourself as a person. The humanness of an individual actually comes out more in an AI society where you're disintermediated from active workers. You can look back at ancient civilizations where they had compelled labor that enabled for these sort of visions of what might become, but obviously in a very different way. So I think that teaching people concepts such as rhetoric could be a very powerful motivator in terms of giving people the skills to communicate better. We'll spend more time in terms of articulating and realizing ourselves. But ultimately, the government's very determined to ensure that the curriculum does meet the needs of the future. And I think that you're right. We need to move forward with this as quickly as possible.
It's a great question. And actually, I will just mention that the speaker following you is Sherry Coutu, who is here, I think there she is, who runs Founders for Schools, which actually takes founders into schools as role models, right? It's just fantastic.
Well, that's great. Well, I hope half of you are going to go into the schools and motivate people. We don't teach entrepreneurship enough. We don't teach about the value of entrepreneurs. I don't think we necessarily celebrate and cherish enough successful entrepreneurs. And I think that when you ask people in the UK, better maybe in Europe, but not nearly as good in the US, do you want to set your own business up? They're appalled. And even my own family, when I became an entrepreneur, you could sense that they were uncomfortable with the choice I made to leave my investment bank and go and set up my own business. They think they're even more uncomfortable now I've gone into politics, but that's another matter.
Yeah. But Lord Johnson, thank you so much for coming and inspiring us. Put your hands together for Lord Johnson.
Well, thanks very much.
Thank you so much.
Great, thank you.